Okay, just to continue on talking about fundamentals here, still looking at our fundamentals of economic theory sheet, which I have up here on my computer, so I keep looking over here. And going down to looking at surpluses, what I want to talk now about is profit and consumer surplus. You've heard of profits. I'm not so sure everyone's heard of consumer surplus, which is a real shame, because consumer surplus is a really big concept in economics, or the fundamental understanding of it. Voluntary exchanges create value, right? If you ever wondered where value comes from in the market, how does an economy grow, right? Where do these things work? How do we get more money? It's basically through this repetition of voluntary exchanges. And my daughter got me a iPod Shuffle. Let's pretend I bought it, right? It's because she was violating her rationality thing. She was buying something from me, so right off the bat we violate one of our principles. But let's say, and I've thought about that. Yeah, I want an iPod. And so, I'll go out and iPod Shuffle, $50, right? And the thing about it is, when you go out to buy anything, as a consumer, you've got some idea of what it's worth in your head. What is an iPod Shuffle worth to you? What would you be willing to pay to be able to hear music simply, right? And so, it was never worth $100 to me. iPods, I never owned an iPod. But, okay, so, I go out, maybe I'm willing to go, I could probably go $70, right? And that's probably about where I'd be willing to go for a little thing like that. And so let's just assume I go out as Joe Consumer and I want to buy an iPod Shuffle, and I'm willing to pay $70 for it. I go to Best Buy or whatever your electronics store is, and they've got the iPod Shuffle there for $50. Nice. So the thing is, what do you think it cost them to make it? Right? I mean, in retail there's a markup from the wholesale price, but just take, ignoring the distinction between producer and retailer, which gets it a little more complicated. Just assume it's all one producer, right? And so, maybe it makes them, what's it cost them to make it? To make the individual thing probably costs just a few bucks. There's, of course, the R&D costs. They have to make, all that, they have to get that back. They've got a lot of costs to make, probably cost them $1 billion to make the first one. But figure maybe $20, right? So let's say their cost to produce this thing is $20. Produce it, get it to there, have it sitting in the store. I paid $50 for the thing, assuming I bought this for myself. I would have paid up to $70. If $70 is, now looking at the sheet, I've got a little line here. I've got an RP. That's the reservation price. Right? You see I've got a little line, and at trying to look at it from your point of view, at this end, I believe, we have the reservation price, and this end we have the zero. And so the reservation price is $70 for me. This is the most I'd be willing to spend. And if I saw an iPod Shuffle for $70, kind of the definition of this is it's my indifference point. It's the point at which $70, take it or leave it. If I paid $70, I would have given up $70 for something that was worth $70 to me. I'd be no better off. However, the price is not my reservation price. I'm fortunate the price is $50, right? So I'm going to pay $50 for something that's worth $70 to me. Nice. But now this is that $20 between $50 and $70. That is what's known as the consumer surplus. That is what I gain. That's how much wealthier I am, happier I am, how much better off I am by $20. Okay, in this case it's $20. Whatever, if your reservation price was $100 for the thing, you'd be willing to, I'd be willing to blow $100 on a shuffle. Well, your consumer surplus would be bigger. And if maybe it would only have been worth $55 to you, right, if you really have no use for the thing, and so you would have a smaller consumer surplus. The point is, consumer surplus is subjective. Every individual sets the value in their head. And in fact, in economics, value, in Western economics, value is subjective. Something is worth the value an individual places on it. And you can't objectify it, right? You know, that's a fundamental concept of Western economics, and in fact, modern philosophy. The individual makes their own judgments, right? So my reservation price, it varies with each person, but the difference between the sale price and the reservation price is a consumer surplus. We cannot measure this. Why? Because it varies for everyone, right? You know, I can't tell you. You know, we sell 1 million iPod shuffles. If everyone's got a different consumer surplus, you got no clue, right? Some people made a little one, and some people are a little better off. Some people are a lot better off. We got no clue. Now, on this side, underneath the price, right? We've got, you know, from zero. First, there's the cost of production, and we were saying it costs $20. The difference between, it's that C on your little line there. The difference between C and P, which is the price, is the profit that's made. In this case, $30 of profit would be made on the sale of the iPod, right? Nice. The point, now this is measured, right? I mean, the cost of production is measured and profit is measured, right? Because we go cha-ching on the cash register, $50. And through taxes and accounting, all of this stuff is measured. And by the way, when I buy that iPod, $50, GNP goes up by $50 because we measure gross national product or gross domestic product, two different ways of measuring the same thing. We measure both of those at the cash register. So when you buy something, you buy $50 iPod Shuffle, you just bumped up GDP $50. Cool. However, think about it for a second. Before I walk in to Best Buy and plunk $50 down for Mr. Shuffle, how much money was there invested in this thing? We were saying it cost $20. This is theoretical. I don't know what they really cost, but if it was $20, then up to that point, the iPod Shuffle was only $20 stuff. You took $20 of labor, or a combination of labor, materials, and that's pretty much it. There's labor and materials and capital, right? And you put it together and you made something. So the iPod was worth $20. But when I walk into the store and I cha-ching $50 down, it's worth $50. And GDP goes up $50. That's how GDP goes up. Is when entrepreneurs or producers see whatever, looking at our chart, for every product, whatever it is, this can of soda that costs like 25 cents, right? It probably cost them 10 cents to make, right? And Sam's Club takes 10 cents of stuff and makes something that I think is worth 30. And now they've created 20 cents of value. And when I buy it, cha-ching, GDP goes up by 20 cents. And I multiply that by everything. Everything you buy, everything you do in life. That's how it grows. People take a quantity of stuff, they do something with it, and they sell it for a higher price. And that's where value and growth comes from. Now, if you screw up, if you make an iPod Shuffle that doesn't work, if you make a classic example of something that didn't work, Billy Beer, right? This is way back when Jimmy Carter was president. His brother made Billy Beer, and I just have a can, right? This is my prop, so I have a can. So just imagine this is Billy Beer, and he was Billy Carter, and they thought his name would sell. It was terrible stuff, and they lost a lot of money. And in that case, what they did is they took millions of dollars. Back when millions was something in the 70s, they took millions of dollars and they, what it away. Okay, I don't want to record cuss words here, but that was a case where they actually destroyed value. Anytime you take something and create something that you can't sell, or you have to sell at a loss, you've actually gone the other way. You destroyed value, and so it can work both ways. The key thing is, in the end, who decides what the value is? It's the consumer. a can of Diet Sam's Cola, caffeine-free, is worth what I'm willing to pay for it. You might not be willing to pay what I pay for this. That's fine. It's your choice. I love this stuff. I like it better than regular Coke. So I buy it, and I'm happy with it. And Sam's Club, apparently they move enough of it, so they make a lot of people happy. Value is subjective. Now, profits, though, the thing is, the profits, the difference between the cost and the sale price is profits. And, profits are bad. We have this social phenomena that people who make profits are evil. They're somehow taking things. It is absolutely core to Western economics that our understanding of a transaction is this entrepreneurial model, that somebody takes C worth of material and makes P worth of product, and they sell it. They get the profit. They get C to P, whatever that profit is. For the shuffle, they get $30. I, as the consumer, give them $50, and I get something worth $70. So the difference between, the profit of $30, now first of all, their profit is $30, my consumer surplus is $20. In economics, we don't compare. We don't say, oh, they got off more than the other, right? We don't do that, because I don't know what $30 is worth to them, and $20 is probably worth more to me than $30 is to Apple, quite frankly. We can't compare. Part of subjectivity is you can't compare one person's value to another. We can measure it and we can quantify it, but we really can't make what are called interpersonal comparisons of utility. So we don't do that. We just say, hey, look, when I buy the shuffle, I'm better off, Apple's better off. They're better off by $30, I'm better off by $20, but we're both better off. That's the whole thing. And they didn't Apple just made $30 in profit off of me. They didn't take that $30 from me. Right? They created that $30. Actually, what they created is that whole pie, that whole surplus value. They took $20 of material and made something I thought was worth $70. They created $50 in surplus value, which the price split in half, or split in some way, not in half, but in some divided up. I call it the surplus pie. And, they created this pie of surplus value. I got 20 of it, they got 30 of it. We're both better off. That is the way Western economists, market economists, think of it. They do not think in kind of the way more Marxist, or as we're seeing now, there's kind of a populism out there. There's another view that views companies as being predatory. And that predatory view of profits and economic activity says you get rich by taking from other people. So Apple got rich because they sold me something that only cost them $20 for $50. They took $30 of my money, right? And, that's the predatory concept, that the way you make money is by either exploiting your workers or exploiting your consumers. Totally alien, and just absolutely by economists, right or wrong, rejected, right? That's not the way it works, folks. The way it works is Apple created $50 of surplus value, and by whose reckoning? By me, Joe Consumer's reckoning, and we split the pie. And the world is better off. GDP went up by $30, but actually, the world is better off by 50, because there's always this idea that there's, Bill Gates has got billions of dollars of profit, but there's a whole bunch of consumer surplus out there that, he created, right? Because people paid for Windows, but they got greater benefit out of it. So he actually created far more. And this is the thing, when an economist sees someone make $1 million in profit, they say they made it by doing something that other people thought was valuable. They created a value, and they not only created that $1 million of value, they created some other unknown amount for these other people. So the idea is, hey, let them have, they created a pie, and they only got their profits are only a part of it. And we don't know what part of it, but let them have their, economists are like, let them have their profits. They earned them. They created it. Without them, there would be no profits. Without the consumer, there would be profits either, but it's a mutually beneficial environment. Now, I know this kind of went long, but this is a very fundamental thing. This mutual benefit, the idea of surplus value being created, and the somewhat difficult concept for some people that value is just this totally subjective thing. It's whatever an individual makes as a judgment. However, that is part and parcel of individualism, of libertarianism, of modern philosophy, and that is consistent with the market model. The market model is very much based on an individualistic view of human activity. Hope that helps. Hope you're still listening to this, and if you have any questions, feel free to email me. And just looking, I will at another point have a video about the Marxist view and the more modern populist view that I was kind of alluded to on the who gets what part of the handout.